All Three Beards Media podcasts originate from the Gravitate Co-working Studio, sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Old Man Strength. I am your host, Chris Shipley, and as always, I welcome back my guest, my co-host, Aaron Wall. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
You know, I'm doing good. I'm still bothered by that intro, but this time it's because it says starring Aaron Wall, and I'm like, am I really starring?
You are
I'm just here.
You drew the short stick, my friend.
I think I'm just here about starring. I'm like a B player or something, I think.
Listen, anytime you want to send over a better photo, you go ahead. But until then, that photo is staying up there. It's my favorite.
Well, buddy, I don't have any good photos in the history of ever. So
Snapchat does some nice filters and clean you right up. It makes me look good.
Hard pass. Hard pass. How are you?
I'm good. Not too bad. 2 weeks in on my new job. It's amazing what happens when you get a fun job and you enjoy it, how much your outlook on life turns around. I'm a lot happier person the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. That always makes a big difference. I've been seeing on Twitter, and we've had a little bit of our own here today, but is it like 70 degrees there and then suddenly going to be like freezing in a couple of days?
It was 78 degrees high today. I drove home with the top down on the car. And tomorrow, I think, is supposed to be 67 mid-morning. And by the time evening rolls around, I think it's supposed to be in the 30s. And then we may or may not get snow on Wednesday. So
nice. Good old Iowa weather.
And as everybody says, it's the girls' basketball tournament week. So,
Oh, that's right.
Thank your lucky stars we're not getting an ice storm, because that could happen too.
That's right. I forgot about that whole every year deal.
Yeah, I always thought it was bullshit, but it seems to happen every year. So
yeah, that's incredible. We got a little hail today, which was unusual for the Pacific Northwest. So it's a weird shit going on everywhere.
That's crazy.
Crazy. Let's get into this, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got our guest tonight, and I'm not going to do a huge introduction because there's so many things I could say that it's probably just better to let him talk about it. But he's an ISU letter winner in football, served in our military, apparently an all-around great guy, according to some people we know. We'll let him argue about that. I don't know. Did the pizza with We Will Collective. Our guest tonight is Tim Creaseman. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. Aaron gave you a brief little introduction, but why don't you fill in some holes? Give our listeners and viewers just a little high-level view of who Tim Creaseman is.
Well, Tim Creaseman's a middle-aged man that's getting older by the hour, by the minute, with not the best health, but no. I currently work for the John Deere Corporation. I have Creaseman Foods on the side, and we got hooked up with We Will here a couple of months ago and started manufacturing frozen pizzas and selling them in the local Hy-Vees and Fairway stores. I was born and raised in Boone, Iowa. Grew up a Cyclone fan ever since I was birthed, and played football there from 83 through 88. And then coached for another year while I finished my degree and graduated in 89. So have a small farm south of the town of Boone, and that's kind of a hobby farmer, and have an ag degree from Iowa State. And that's kind of my story.
Well, that's I think doing it pretty lightly, because it sounds like there's a lot of stuff in there. But
Yeah, I've done a lot of things. Been in the
I've
military, been around the world. I've done a lot of things. So
yeah, so I didn't grow up a Cyclone. I don't even think I've said this on this pod. Anyways, I was born a Mizzou Tiger.
oh wow.
Yeah, I grew up in Missouri, Kansas City, till we moved to Iowa when I was 10, which would have been 1989. No offense.
Jesus Christ, what a dick. Why are you on an old man strength podcast? I'm like 20 years older than you are.
Yeah,
not quite.
Young man strength.
Not quite. So I didn't grow up into it, and never, and obviously I didn't play collegiate athletics either. But can you describe what it's like growing up as a fan of a team and then having the opportunity to play for them?
Well, when I was a little kid, I grew up in Boone, Iowa, which was 11 miles, 13 miles from Iowa State. And my dad, he grew up a Husker and came from Western Nebraska, McCook, Nebraska, and he came to town with $40 in a suitcase, and he established a meat processing plant called Randy's Meats with a great uncle and some cousins. And there was a lot of these plants around the country that were his uncles that kind of started the company. So he came to town and he gravitated, being so close to Iowa State, he gravitated towards Iowa State. And back in the old Clyde Williams Field days, he bought season tickets. And that was probably, I was born in 65. That's how old I am. And I remember ever since I was, 2 years old or even before, sitting on his lap at Iowa State games at the old Clyde Williams Field. So that was kind of, I kind of grew up that way. And I had, when I was a little kid, I told this on another podcast, that I had a little George Amundsen football. I had a little tiny, those little yellow footballs. They would come over to Boone and they would do fundraisers or speaking events. So I had a George Amundsen autographed football, and he played, I think he was done in like 72. So I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, went to the wrestling meets. I don't remember ever going to any of the basketball games, but I do remember going to Clyde Williams and the Cannon and watching games, sitting on my dad's knee, as a little kid. So had a Matt Blair jersey when I was a little kid, I think it's 47. I don't have the jersey anymore, obviously, but so I just kind of grew up, just had it in my blood. And then I missed a lot of my senior year playing football. So Iowa State wasn't going to give me a scholarship. I could have went to Drake and some other schools, Northeastern Oklahoma or wherever, but I just always wanted to go to Iowa State. So, as a walk-on. So I walked on the program, and the rest is kind of history, so.
So what was that like as a memory for your dad then? If to be able to watch his son put on a uniform?
I don't know. He was
the exact opposite, right? So
they called him the Duke. He was kind of, he wasn't, you didn't get a lot of kudos from that guy. He was just kind of a big, hardened old farm type guy. And but I think he was proud of me, especially when I started to play and get on the field a little bit. I think he was, I think he was proud. He never missed a game. He would put on the old farmer coveralls, and he would go to each and every game, and he just never missed. He donated money when they built the new stadium, Cyclone Stadium, and now named Jack Trice. And so he just was one of those guys that was just a diehard, which was crazy. He still cheered for the Huskers, but he wore his cardinal and gold when we played Nebraska, which I'd never really understood that. But I don't know. He just was always a Cyclone fan through all the good times and the bad times. And I remember going when I was 12, going to the Nebraska-Iowa State game out in Lincoln. And when we beat them, Nebraska had I Am Hip and all these great players. And we had like Dexter Green, all these other great Cyclones. And I remember as a little kid, walking across University of Nebraska's campus after Iowa State had beat them. And, the tuba player was crying. They were bawling. To see grown people cry like that when you're a 11-year-old kid, I'm like, I remember saying to my dad, I'm like, Dad, why is the band, why are they crying? I mean, it's a game, right? And he was like, they don't take losing out here very well, and it doesn't happen very often. And so, so that was kind of my takeaway, but I was happy that we won, and I had my Iowa State jersey on, and I was like, woo, and the Nebraska fans hated my guts, probably for being like that. But my cousin all my cousins on my dad's side. He had one sister. They had 4 kids. They all went to graduated University of Nebraska. And the center on the football team was my oldest cousin's roommate at the time when we were out there. So he was attending Nebraska. We were there with my aunt and uncle. So it was a great day to be a Cyclone fan, I think. But the old Earl Bruce days, So, and I got to sit next to Earl Bruce and Johnny Majors at a letter winners event. They came up and plopped down right across from me on a picnic table, and I think it was there with Greg Butts and Shroggy and all these other guys. And I remember them coming up and sitting down, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Earl Bruce, that's Johnny Majors, I was like, oh my God, hey, Coach Bruce, can I get a picture with you? Because I grew up as a little kid, watching his team, so it was just kind of neat. It's always fun, and I think my dad was proud of me. I think he's dead now, but I think he never really said as much, I think, but he never missed a game either, so it was kind of fun.
Yeah, he was like a lot of guys that age. He was an actions guy, right?
Yeah, I do remember we played down in Oklahoma State in Stillwater, and he had a horse. We had horses. I had horses growing up in cattle. We grew up out in the country, and he was a horse breeder. He bred registered quarter horses and registered paint horses, and he was down there for a sale, but he came over to the game. So I mean, he even went to a couple of the away games. So he was a super fan, I think.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of start there with your dad, because it obviously with playing football and serving in the military and being in charge of your company or whatever, such a strong work ethic. Grew up on a farm, I'm assuming. What were your days as a young Tim on the farm with your dad, and what was that like?
Well, he worked in town, but it was, he came, he was born like during the Depression time, and he came from nothing. My father was a miner and then worked for the railroad before he retired. And so my grandfather, so, he just, he grew up in a tough era. I mean, you hit the ground running, I think was his work ethic. And a day in the life, I grew up at a very early age walking beans and baling hay, and I still put up a lot of hay to this day. I think that's just one of the things that just kind of is in my blood, and why I still hobby farm. I love it. I always tell my wife, if I win the lottery, I'm going to farm till the money's gone, so. But I like the farming, and that was kind of my childhood. I spent, when I was in college, I would get out of bed in the summer. I would feed cattle. I worked for a cattle feeder north of the town of Boone, Iowa, that fed about 2,000 head of cattle. And so you'd be on a tractor and fixing fence and doing the whole 9 yards. And I had an ag degree, so that made sense to me. So my summers were spent working on the farm, where a lot of other kids maybe had jobs at other types of venues. So, but that was kind of where I get my drive. My dad was the type of guy that had, he's president of the school board, deacon of the church. He's got ball fields named after him in Boone. He was kind of he did a lot for the community. And the day that he died, we went to the cemetery to pick out the plot. And we were talking to the guy, and he ran the Boone Fire and Rescue in a small town. Boone's 13,000 people. And the guy said, your dad, we would buy fish for our fish fry, for our fire and rescue, to buy new equipment. And they'd go over to Randy's Meats, and he would take care of the bill. We'd ask him, what do we owe you? And he's like, nothing, I got it. And so he was very generous in the community, I think, as all my family was. They gave a lot to the town, and that's just the type of guy he was. And hopefully some of that rubbed off on me. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like it with all that you're doing, and we'll get into more of that. But I want to say that Tim and I might be the only people in the world that enjoy baling hay.
Yeah,
I miss it.
Not much anymore.
I tell you, I miss it some days still. I mean, my dad was managed grain elevators when I was growing up, so he would sell me out to all the farmers. My boy's available, right? But I just, it was something about being on a wagon and throwing bales, and I enjoyed it. It's weird. I don't know what it is.
Well, I
that
bought a
worked.
new square baler, a brand new John Deere square baler, and I'm thinking this will be good. I have 3 kids, a son, a daughter, and a son, and my youngest is going to be turning 18 this April. And I thought, well, I'll buy a square baler, and they'll learn the same work ethic I had. 104-degree heat. We'll go out there and bale hay. My daughter, the minute she would hit the field, how long are we going to do this? All day, 10, 12 hours. What, is there another field after this one? Oh yeah. And she,
Yeah.
well, you're sitting in the air conditioned cab. And I'm like, well, I've paid my dues, it's
Right.
your turn, and my wife would come out and she would help. And then she would come up to the tractor and she says, this is it. She goes, I'm taking Chloe home. She goes, I cannot handle the bitching. I can't handle it. She's like, she's just wearing me down. She's taking the fun out of it. But I had my kids out there, and they all 3 have a pretty good work ethic. Not because I, it wasn't the beating. The beatings will continue till the morale improves. It wasn't quite like that, but it was, it was kind of close. It was, we worked and they got paid, and I paid them, and I just thought that, well, this will be great. They'll have to learn, but the kids today, it's not like that. They won't do it. But I remember one day we were baling, it was about 104 in there, and you'll appreciate this, but it was like 104 degrees. And my oldest son was on the rack and he was doing great. He was by himself putting up bale after bale after bale. And he started throwing up. And I'm like, uh-oh. Heat stroke. I'm thinking, all right, I've maybe overdid it a little bit, So I'm like, that was kind of the end of that. But a friend of mine bought the baler off me, and now he does it, but it's all automated anymore. We don't, if we can grab it with it bundles the square bales, and if we can get it with a grapple, and then I also do round bales. Everything's done from an air conditioned cab. If you can do it that way, because I get soft. I mean, I'm a fair weather farmer now. It's a hobby. I just do it because it's kind of like relief, like PTSD treatment or whatever. It's a way to get outside, and so that's kind of the deal. That's kind of why I do it. But
go ahead, Aaron.
I was say no more going up into the barn and coming out with black stuff coming out of your nose for 2 days.
Well, that still happens, because once in a while a baler, and I try to have fairly new equipment, but when things don't cooperate, you're working on it, and you still, I come home and my nose is all stuffed up, and I need Benadryl for the next 3 days after that. And I'm thinking to I'm telling my wife, that's it, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I physically can't do it. It just kills the sinuses.
Have you ever baled hay, Chris?
I did it one time. I did it at believe it or not, during a day of scout camp. I was going through the order of Arrow, and you had to do 24 hours of servitude. And the local farmer next to the camp happened to know that every week the camp had that, so he would go over and get 5 or 6 scouts and come over there. And sure enough, I was the guy that had to grab the bales and put it on the thing, and it would go all the way up to the top of the top of the barn and then drop it in there. And that was my job. And somehow I got my shirt caught in that thing, and it tore half my shirt off. But it was hot and sweaty, and it was miserable, and I never wanted to do it again. And I'm pretty sure that farmer was like, don't ever send that fucking kid over here again. So, and I can relate, Tim, because I mowed the lawn so terrible one time. My dad came in the house and was like, that's it. He's never fucking mowing it again. And my mom's like, why? And he's like, because I'll have a fucking heart attack watching him out there.
Wow.
And so, for several years, my mom had to mow, and she was like, this is bullshit. I got a perfectly able 16, 17-year-old kid in there. But because you can't handle the stress of watching him, I got to mow the lawn. So
no, I make my youngest. They've all taken turns on the lawnmower, and it's a riding lawnmower, and I got a small yard, but he rounds the corners. I'm like, what are you doing? You're missing some. It's a yard. You got a John Deere riding lawnmower, and you're missing it. Or I look out there, and he's in road gear, or the mower deck's up, and he doesn't even. He's oblivious to it. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, take a little pride. My yard is, looks bad on. I got an agronomic degree. I mean, the yard should look like yard of the month, And so I get a little upset with my kids sometimes, and they're like, "What's the big deal, Dad?" I'm like, I'll tell you what the big deal is. You know, you half-assing it. That's what's the
Right.
big deal. No,
But
This is
I
some
I-
serious old man strength
right,
conversation.
yeah. But I learned as I grew up and watched him do his job. You know, he worked he hung drywall for years, and I would watch him go every day and come home and he'd eat dinner and he'd have, you know, stuff all over his face because he had
Yeah,
worked all
drywall
day and
dust,
whatever else. And I learned as I got older that that's what you do. You put in the time and you put in the work, no matter how hard it is.
Yeah.
And you know, there is something to be said for being able to put in a hard day's work and feel like you accomplished something. So I get it.
That
Totally.
drywall is not an easy business. A friend of mine and I had a drywall crane, a truck, and we handled all of Menards' drywall for Ankeny, coming out of the
Mhm.
Ankeny Menards, which is one of the largest Menards for construction supplies. And his two sons helped us. And I'm talking about when you're lumping drywall all day, that is not easy.
No.
And we had the crane, and if you couldn't crane it all the way to the front door, and you had to put it on a cart and you had to move it around the house, and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't. I'm like, what did we get ourselves into? We thought we were gonna make all this money, we
Yeah.
had this truck, but
He
that was easy.
he would work. I would work with him during the summer, and most of the time my job was, you know, holding the sheetrock up there on the ceiling while he was bolting that fucker in there. But there'd be times he'd carry full sheets of it inside by himself, and the man could walk around on stilts like no other. And I was like, I don't even know that I could stand on those, let alone walk around. So that's a skill. I could
An art.
I could mud and tape a wall if I had to, if somebody pointed a gun to my head, but not near as well as he could. So for sure.
Yeah.
So went to Iowa State.
Yeah,
Played for Kreiner. Is that right?
Kreiner. Everything was going to
Yeah.
be finer with Kreiner. That was the
Yeah.
slogan. And we had.
I mean, I'm resident to ask, but how did that end? How'd that go?
With a bunch of NCAA allegations and a man's
Right.
fired.
Yes.
And then I was lucky. I had Jim Walden for 1 year.
I love
and
him.
Walden was the nicest guy. The guy was a saint. I played with him for one spring, and then that summer I had a motorcycle wreck and I ripped off my right foot, and that was at the end of my playing days. And he still called me. And when I was in the Army, I was off at my armor basic course at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I was a tank platoon leader. And Jim Walden called me. I'm like, how did he even know I was there? Well, he called my house, but he wanted to talk to me. I don't remember what it was about. But what a gracious guy. What a great guy. Good human being, and he was a good guy. But, Kreiner, he had great talent handed to him. When you look at the years, 2 years ahead of me, like the other day, we did a We Will sampling Sunday. Yesterday,
Yeah.
we did one. And Max, Kevin Eggleston, we call him Big Max. Kevin Eggleston came up to it. And it was good seeing
Yeah, I've
him.
met Kevin.
He was a few years older than me. But that generation that came in, they were recruited. A lot of those guys were recruited. Ken Anderson, they were recruited by like Mac Brown and Donnie Duncan, and they had great players. The Bruce Reimers, that era, they had Chris Washington, Dennis Gibson, Greg Butts. There was a lot of great players that came from those generations that was handed to Kreiner. And I kind of think if we had a coach maybe like Matt Campbell and he would have had that talent, we would have fared a lot better. And we were still 6-5 my junior year, and without a coach. We went into our last game down at Oklahoma State and lost it by maybe 3 or 4 points. And we lost it. We had Charlie Banker, who the following year won a Super Bowl ring with the Redskins as their special teams coach. So I mean, we had if we would have had a coach, I'm thinking maybe we would have been 7-4. But I'm not so sure 7-4 would have got you a bowl game back then. But we had really good talent. We had, big Jimmy Lubers. I mean, they were just some fanatical, really, really good players that I think were NFL type players. Had they, had played in Nebraska or Oklahoma, I think they would have got a lot of guys. We would have put more guys in the NFL than we did, I think. But yeah. So Kreiner was, I don't know. I was so young. The man, I don't really have anything against him, but it was a revolving door for coaches. We didn't have very good continuity of coaches. And Phil Bennett was the defensive. I played running back and I played linebacker. I kind of did them both. And I remember Kreiner came in to me and he said, "Hey, you got to go be a running back." I'm like, "I don't think you understand, coach. I've never ran the ball in my life." And I realized what he wanted. He wanted a scout team running back to, a big punching bag is what he wanted. But I remember I was talking with Schroggy just today, and he kind of reminded me. He said, "Chris, that I should tell you and Aaron about." There was a guy named Roger McCarron,
Yeah,
and
this is
and
on
we
my
were
list to ask you
we
about.
were the only two. We were the only two white guys in the running back room at the time, and we would take turns being the fullback and tailback, but we would run on the scout team. And I would be the tailback. Roger would be the fullback. We'd run an I formation because we're mimicking Nebraska's offense or something like that. But I remember running on the ball, and I would get like 7 yards against the first team defense. And Phil Bennett would be like, "That's 7 freaking yards by Creaseman. Run it again." And you'd look at big Jimmy Lubers, and he's over there just snot's coming out of his face. He's pissed because Phil's just riding him. Him and Jeff Braswell and Greg Leiter and Billy Bertheson. "You suck. Do it again. Same play." And I'm like, "Oh, great." So I remember Roger. We'd line up and Roger would kind of turn and he'd look around over the shoulder and he goes, "Oh my God." He goes, "I hope I don't miss my block on big Jimmy Lubers." And you'd look at Lubers and he'd be over there just snorting fire. And I'm like, "Oh God, I got to run into that." And he knows where the play's going. And it was horrible. So Roger got hit one time and he got hit so hard, it collapsed his helmet into his cheek. It bent you had the frame that went up around the helmet. It collapsed it into his cheek and he came back to the huddle and he goes, "Hey, Crease, what's wrong with this picture?" I'm like, "Take your helmet off." He goes, "I can't get it off." The managers had to unbolt the face mask to get his helmet off his head. He got hit so hard it broke you never see that, but that's him and Jimmy Lubers, Pop Everett. We had some really, really tough guys. And you talk about a beating. I was telling those kids, I had some of the Cyclones yesterday. You had Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins and all these guys in the offensive line. And I was telling the story about, like how long our practices were. And Kevin was there, Big Max was there. And we were talking about them. Like, "Oh yeah, they'd run us. Practice would be 3.5 hours." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." And one day they restarted practice. You had this clock that the equipment guys would have up in the stadiums, and and as a battering ram on the scout team, you can imagine just how long that practice was. And I said, we hit every day. We hit Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you might be in helmet and shoulder pads on Thursdays, but there was no Mondays off. Sunday was your off day, and you were just trying to get through the week. But I just remember that with this one practice, and we practiced in the stadium, and so you're down on the turf, and it's like 120 degrees wet bulb temperature down on the turf, and we ran a 3-hour practice in this heat. And Kreiner was so mad at the offensive line, everybody was dogging it. He restarted practice, and he ran about another half of practice, and the offensive linemen were throwing up water. They'd get down in their stance, and not one, like 4 or 5 of them would bend over and they would all 3 or 4 throw up all at once. And Frank Randall, the only humanity I ever saw out of Frank Randall was when he looked at Jim Kreiner and said, "Jim, you're going to kill somebody. You need to stop this right now." And that practice was like 4 hours. I remember weighing in, I lost like 17 pounds. And I was a skinny guy at the time. I mean, I'm a fatty now, but I was a skinny guy at the time.
You were like, "This is nothing. I baled hay."
Well, I kind of giggled when the guy started throwing up. I'm like, but you were tired. I mean, I was tired. I remember, you'd have a headache. You only had one helmet. Today, these kids get 5 helmets. They have a practice helmet. I had the same helmet. I was lucky if it had any pads in it, because, you'd go into, to get a jock strap and it'd be broken. And they're like, "Can't you sew it together? Can't you tie a knot in it?" I mean, it was like, in those days, they didn't have the money with the equipment and the clothes and all that stuff. But we had these old equipment guys, you'd get a shoe with a hole in it. And, you were like a second-class citizen if you were a walk-on in those days, or you were on the scout team. But
and that was, you're talking turf. That was the old AstroTurf.
Porch carpet over asphalt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Porch carpet over asphalt.
How awful was playing on that?
With seams in it that you would trip over. Oh, it was horrible. I remember as a running back, Chris Moore was my roommate, and number 55, Seymour, we called him, and I did an outside play. It was like 7-on-7, and I ran it, and I got away from him, and I hear this, he's running, and he runs me down, and I kick it into gear, but it's too late because it's the end of the play. I'd given up. I was out of bounds, and he tackles me, and he took me down. I slammed my head on the porch carpet, on the asphalt, and that's literally what it was. It was so thin. And I remember came up, I was cross-eyed. I had a concussion. There were no concussions back in those days. I was seeing double all the way back to the huddle, but that's how hard it was. It was just, you might as well play in a parking lot. You might as well practice in a Hy-Vee parking lot. It's just terrible. I think all the fields were like that. Oklahoma's field was domed so bad that I remember, I think it was like 85. I think Troy Aikman was still with the Sooners at the time. I remember sitting on the bench and looking across the field, and you could only see him from the belly button up because the field was so domed. If you were sitting down and the other guy was sitting down, you couldn't, the field was, and they ran that triple option. It was downhill and around the corner, and they were gone, So, but yeah, all the fields some had more padding than others, but.
Well,
That's wild.
I've got some word association here that Keith gave me. Keith's really producing this pod. He gave me all kinds of good.
He's an instigator.
He's
an enabler. He's an enabler.
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
That's right. We've talked about Jim Lubers. How about Jeff Broswell?
Bullhead, bull cut. He had a haircut that would be like a bull cut. I can't even do it because I'm missing part of my hair, but it fell out last week. Seriously.
Join the club.
But I should have a hat on, but I don't. But it's okay.
That's why I'm wearing one.
Yeah, Braswell. I don't know how to. He was a good hitter. He leaned forward, but never listened to the coaches. I had Braswell in a class, and the class was human development. And so the teacher gave you an egg. You were supposed to name the egg, and you were supposed to take care of it like a child for the whole week. And we walk out of Carver Hall, and here comes Cyride, and he takes his egg and he throws it right into the side of Cyride. And I'm like, you're going to get an F, I'm like, you lost your egg. You're going to have to go to the store and buy another one. And he shows up next week. He had a rock, and he painted a face on it with a Sharpie. And so his egg had turned into a rock. But that's what I think of Braswell. I think he's kind of a rockhead. Good hitter though. I mean, he was.
I'm sure this is going to elicit a story, but spring break trips.
Oh boy. Yeah, we took about 18 guys down to Fort Lauderdale, and I had a roommate that lived with me and Greg Butts and Keith Fulton, and he lived in the basement with me. He was from Fort Lauderdale, so we're going to Fort Lauderdale. And Keith Fulton's dad, his dad was a football coach out in Garden City, Kansas, but his dad had a Class C camper. It wasn't a very big Class C, probably like 21, 22 footer. And he said, Keith, he says, we'll let you go with this. You go get your camper from your dad. And they put about 15 guys in that thing. There was no place to sit. And when it came back, the tanks were ripped off of the underside of it. I think the air conditioner on the top got ripped off. They went under an underpass that they weren't supposed to be going under, or a tree. I mean, this RV was absolutely trash when it came back. So you'd have to interview Greg Butts. He's got some better stories with it. But I went, and a friend of mine from Boone, Iowa, named Mike Clemens. Mike doesn't want me probably telling the story, but he pulled a van. And Ken Sandblum and me and Mike and one other guy rode in the van. So we had a van and we had an RV, and we had I think there was like 18 guys. And we show up at this place. We didn't have any hotel rooms or anything like that. We show up on A1A on the Strip. The only place available was a 1-bedroom with 2 double beds, place called the Hurricane Inn, ran by some Pakistani gun runners. And nobody had any money. And so there's all these guys, and there was like 2 beds. I don't know who got the beds. I had to sleep in the van. I slept on top of the van for a week. It was horrible. But it was one of the funnest spring breaks, and I could go on and on and on. Kirk Thomas was with us, and he passed out. We put him in the closet, and And yeah, it was. Yeah, but it was fun. It was a week of festivities for sure.
I'll bet. I'm going to bring up a couple photos here that.
Oh God, I sent you all kinds of goofy stuff.
Well,
didn't
I know, but no, I'll.
Oh, you
I'll
keep those
bring up-
out.
Yeah, I've got them. But we'll see what we can bring.
They're going
to
to show up when you're least
Oh
expecting.
God,
That's right. Let's see here. Let me bring this over. Sorry, I'm not a very good producer on this. I don't know what I'm doing. This is
It's
great.
also why you couldn't bale hay for more than one day.
that's right.
That's right. Hey man, that shit was hard. So
I used to do it in a t-shirt. I didn't even cover my arms. It was jeans and a t-shirt.
I don't need
Your
that
arms
image
and forearms
at
are all
all.
scratched up. Yeah.
You know what?
Yep.
Let's take a break. Right. Let's take a break. All right. We'll get a break from our sponsor, Revelton Distilling Company and Gravitate Co-working, and then when we come back, we'll show some of these pictures, and then I want to dive into your decision to go into the military. So we'll be right back.
Why take the best corn in the world and make it into fuel when you could make it into whiskey? That's the question that launched Revelton, Iowa's most visible and fastest growing distillery. Owners Rob and Christy Taylor embrace the grain-to-glass philosophy, sourcing ingredients locally and overseeing on-premises production and bottling at their facility in Osceola. One sip, and you'll agree that Revelton's handcrafted whiskeys, gins, and vodkas are the best you've ever tasted. And with the launch of their rye whiskey, made with 100% Iowa-grown rye and corn, and their new bourbon coming soon, there's more Revelton to love than ever. Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com. The great thing about working from home is working from home. The worst thing is working from home, especially for face-to-face collaborations with customers and coworkers. And let's face it, coffee shop meetings are neither private nor professional. So skip the trip to Starbs and investigate Gravitate Co-working Space. For more than 10 years, Gravitate has provided large and small office and conference spaces perfect for hosting meetings, workshops, or other events, as well as private phone booths for confidential conversations. Plus, all spaces include secure fiber internet, free coffee, and access to a kitchenette. All you need is your laptop. Gravitate does the rest. And renting space at Gravitate is surprisingly affordable. An hour of office space costs about the same as venti caramel macchiatos and breakfast sandwiches for two. Daily and monthly rates are also available with no long-term commitment. Learn more at gravitatecoworking.com. That's gravitatecoworking.com.
And we're back, but Chris is still on mute.
I hate this computer that I have. It's absolutely slow. I need a new one. I can't even get it to bring this screen share up. So I'm gonna do this.
You know they sell new computers at a store, right?
I'm aware of that, but I'm poor, so we'll do it the old school way. Tell me about the guys in this photo.
All right, hold it still. From the right, you have Greg Butts. I'm the big fat guy who looks like a lemon. And then you have, I think Yak's in there, Steve Cromie, the Crowbar from Chicago, Billy McHugh, Jeff Hansel, and I think Todd Oxley might be in there. Yeah, Oxley's in there. I think Roger McCarron's in there. Ken Anderson, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah.
So
that's just at a tailgate. Yeah.
Yep. Best story about any of those guys?
Oh God. Kent will kill me if I told the one that Max told me the other day, but no.
That's the kind of breaking news we're looking for, Tim.
Oh boy. there was Kevin Eggleston's from Memphis, Missouri, right? And he's 6'8", 6'9". He's a huge man. He was a great offensive lineman. And his I call it a partner in crime, for lack of a better word, was Mike Roberts from Eldon, Iowa. And they called him Cletus. So it's Cletus and Max, and they were to the right side of the line. But Kent was, Kent's a pretty guy. He's a good looking guy. And Kent was the Davis County Relays, Max was telling me about it, and he goes, the fat guys, he goes, me and Cletus were over there throwing the shot put and the discus, and then all of a sudden, he said, they started playing this music. They held us up. They said, stop throwing. And all of a sudden, this music from, Ric Flair type music started playing. And Kent's walking into the stadium, with and the way Max would tell it. He says, oh, the fans were on him, and his golden locks of blonde hair were blowing in the wind as all the track moms were staring at him and applauding. And the cheerleaders and everybody all the girls track teams were going wild for Kent, as he walked in, and there was the smoke machine was putting out smoke. And of course, Cletus thought it was a barbecue. And I had to tell Cletus, no, it's not a barbecue. That's just for Kent's entrance, And then Kent was probably, and Kent was like, that's not true. That's not true. And Max is like, it is true. And so it was kind of a funny story to hear those guys tell that story. And guys like, myself and Roger McCarron and John Smith, we used to hear those stories in the locker room, and we just start laughing. You'd laugh so hard you're crying when those guys would tell that story. They were just funny. I mean, they were just really, really funny guys. We had great personalities on our football team in the 80s. We had great people. And they were funny, but Max and Cletus, they would throw shade on anybody, and it was funny.
Kevin's chiming in, says it's awesome. Kevin's a good man. Yeah. I met him once. So I look forward to getting a chance to sit down with him too. So let's kind of transition a little bit and move into so after college, you said you had a motorcycle accident, hurt your foot, that ended your playing career. But then did you go into the military right after college, or when did that come?
In 1990, I wanted to fly. I had learned to fly through Iowa State. They picked up my lab fees, and so I got my private pilot's license through Iowa State. Small plane. So I thought I'd like to fly, and I always wanted to serve in the military. I thought that would be a good career. So I wanted to fly a jet. Well, the Marine Corps was the only one that would guarantee you flight school. Period. Anybody else, it was on the merit, on the merits of your abilities and stuff. So you could join the Army, you could join the Air Force, and you would not be guaranteed a seat in flight school. The Marine Corps was different. So I went into the Marine Corps, and I went off to basic training and was getting all the way through that. And we had to go through a medical review, and I had a bad foot. I had a skin graft on my foot, and a Navy doctor, I'll never forget, he's a little Filipino looking guy. A captain calls me over and looks at my foot, and he goes, we're breaking your contract. You're done. We're sending you out. He goes, or you could reclass into the infantry. And I'm like, well, I don't want to, if I can't, how can I be in the Marine Corps infantry and I can't sit in a cockpit?
Right.
F-18. The F-18 was the new jet. That was the new sexy jet, Top Gun. We weren't too many from that. So everybody wanted to be a jet jockey and fly. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, so that was the end of that deal. So I was back out, and they threw me out, but they didn't put anything in my file saying I couldn't be in the military. So fast forward a few years later, a friend of mine was in special operations at Fort Bragg, and he came back. He was getting out of the Army, but he wanted to just be in the National Guard, and he wanted to go become an officer. So he goes, hey, I want to join the Iowa State ROTC program and get a degree. How do I do it? I said, well, I'll show you where the building is. I'll take you over to where the ROTC's at Iowa State at the Armory. So I took him over to it. So while I'm in there, the colonel starts talking to me. He goes, why don't you join? And I said, well, I already kind of started down this path. And I said, I had a bad foot. And he goes, well, do the medical if they pass you, and you can do the PT. And I could, we'll accept you if you want to do it. So then I went into the Iowa National Guard. At the time, the commander of the unit that I went into was classmates of my older brother. He eventually became the adjutant general, Major General Tim Orr. And so he was the commander of our unit. And he'd always told me that, hey, if you ever get in, I'd love to have you in my unit. And so sure enough, I went through ROTC. I enrolled working on my master's degree at Iowa State in agriculture. And I went through ROTC and worked a full-time job and voila, commissioned, and then got in the Iowa National Guard and commissioned in May of 2001. And the first of the 113th Cav. So, and that was the unit I stayed with and retired as a major in 2013. So Had 2 deployments. Went to Kosovo in 2003. And it was kind of funny. A good friend of mine, Dave Updegraff, was our battlefield commander in Afghanistan. He was a bird colonel, probably would have been a 1-star had he stayed in. He was saying he went to the War College and they were teaching the riots of Kosovo in 2004. St. Patrick's Day 2004, I don't know where you guys were at, but I was getting pummeled. I was getting my ass kicked by 50,000 pissed off Albanians in this town called Jalan, and there was probably 60,000 people rioting. And I'm not talking Visha riots. I'm talking hardcore people getting hammers put in the back of their head. And it was a weird day when that started in 2004. We had a West Pointer that came to our forward operating base, our FOB. It was Monteith, Camp Monteith. It's not even there anymore. It's bulldozed. You had 2 camps in Kosovo. You had Camp Bonsteel. You had Camp Monteith. I was at Monteith, a smaller one. It was just our squadron was at it. Our whole squadron went. I was a scout platoon leader. I had taken this captain from West Point and his cadet who had happened to come from Nebraska. We put him in Humvees. We took him around and showed him the country. It's kind of peaceful, not a lot going on. We get back about 2:33 in the afternoon, and I get a call from my captain, my commander, saying, "Hey, Jeff Perrin, a friend of mine, is trapped at the Serbian church and it's on fire." And his soldiers had been awarded the Soldier's Medal for their actions at that church. They went in and pulled out families that were in this burning huge cathedral of a church. And you had the ethnic Albanians and the ethnic Serbs. They were fighting in Kosovo, and it was the we-they civil war type tug of war. And we were there to enforce UN Resolution 1244. So I go there to get Jeff, and I get there, and the church is on fire, and there's people everywhere, in the downtown. And then I get a call from our task force commander, Red Horse commander, that said, "Hey, you got to go rescue 200 UN workers. Their 4-story building is just getting mobbed." And so we had to push through the crowd, and the streets were wall-to-wall people. It was like Mardi Gras. So we had soldiers in front of the Humvees pushing the crowds out of the way as we navigated to this downtown area called Jalan, or Jelani. I don't know how you pronounce it. And it's a town of about 150,000 people. It's a pretty big town. And everybody was on the streets, and these UN workers were trapped inside this UN building, and they're across the intersection, if you will, was a police station, the local police station. Police were nowhere to be had. So we set up a perimeter, and we blocked off the streets and put razor wire out and had soldiers, and everybody went red on their weapons. And I mean, it was a hostile, they were throwing Molotovs. We had probably 20 to 22 cars that had caught fire inside our perimeter and had exploded. One of them knocked me back and took my Kevlar off my head. When it carburetor blew up, gas tank, whatever it was a pretty good explosion. They were pummeling us with rocks. There was gunfire, nothing really directly at us, but it was a huge deal. And I guess they teach this. My colonel was telling me, he goes, "Yeah, they teach this at the War College." I said, "Well, hell, I should go to the War College and teach this. Hell, I know about it. I was there. I had a front row seat."
Right.
So, but that was Kosovo, and that's the way the country was. We were there. Today it's kind of a peacekeeping, I don't even know if it's still considered a hostile fire zone, but when we were there, it was fairly fresh out of the Balkan War, where they had the mass killings and just all that stuff going down. People would get murdered, Yeah,
that's interesting, because I don't know very many people that were in the military that went to Kosovo, but
it was a guard
my brother
mission.
did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my brother was in the Army, and he was over there. I think it was shortly after when you were there, the way it sounds. But he was there as a helicopter mechanic, and he was a guard unit that got sent over for I don't know, 8 or 10 months or something like that. He was there for a while.
They had our pilots were bush pilots from Alaska, or Black Hawk pilots, and they were good. They could set you down up on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. And when that helicopter took off, if you had to patrol an administrative boundary line, that helicopter took off. It was a lonely feeling when you're up there all by yourself. But we had an Apache pilot that was killed the rotation ahead of us. But how the Guard gets in a lot of these missions, like the Sinai mission or the Horn of Africa mission, is the active duty Army. When Iraq kicked off, there goes the active duty Army. They go into Iraq and Afghanistan, and so they get the A game. And who does these peacekeeping missions like the Sinai mission, which a lot of people don't even know we got troops in Egypt, monitoring the whole Sinai mission. And that gets handed down to the Guard. And then when there's no more wars to fight, then the active military kind of takes it over. But I think Kosovo is like a partner state, I think, with the Iowa Guard. And so, we've always had, we've had a lot of rotations that have gone through there. But you follow, a different National Guard. Like when we went into Afghanistan in 2010 during the surge, our whole brigade went, the whole state of Iowa, which is 2nd Brigade of the 34th Infantry Division, that whole brigade augmented the 101st Division and replaced their 4th Brigade that didn't make it. So when that 101st goes, they'll have 1st Brigade, 2nd Brigade, 3rd Brigade, and then the Iowa Guard would be their 4th Brigade. And you own battle space, and you're there part of their division. So
and then time in Afghanistan. When did you go to Afghanistan? What were you?
2010 through 2011, because we were there over the holidays. And then we came back. The deployments are always a year for the Guard. I was talking to a guy who was in a Ranger bat, and he goes, we get 90-day deployments, and the Air Force gets 90-day deployments. I said, well, not the regular guys; they get a year, So that's kind of a suck for the families, And so I went there then, and it was during the surge. We were at Bagram Airfield, and then we had outlier forward operating bases that were in our squadron. There was one called Pulley Syed and one called Red Hill. And I don't even know if they're functioning today. Well, they're obviously not functioning today, but how during the surge I think Bagram Airfield had about 70,000 personnel on it between SEAL teams. I was there when bin Laden went down. Our HUMINT team girl actually got pulled over into that mission. We didn't know it at the time. Her name was Lenny, and she would come into our office and she'd say, I'm not going to work with you anymore, Captain Creaseman. I'm sorry to say I have to work at the next compound over. Well, the next compound over from ours it's just a fenced in area. We called it the Spook Compound. It's where the CIA and the SEALs and Rangers and all these different guys worked. And then there was a Special Forces compound. 5th Group Special Forces was right next to our headquarters building too, where we all lived. You had an area, you had these little metal huts that you lived in, with plywood floors, and that was your home for a year. And then everybody had their own little compound, their own little space. But we were battle space owners, so 5th Group, they operated in our battle space, and sometimes we'd send QRF guys, a platoon of guys to be QRF for them, and that's kind of the way the whole mission went. But we were in the north. We had, I think, Chris, I sent you a picture of our MRAPs up in the mountains. We would operate higher than Pikes Peak. You'd go up, there's no trees, it's just snow. It's the middle of July, and there's snow up in the mountains. The air was thin, and if you did a dismounted patrol, you were wearing 144 pounds of gear on you. It was, for me, for a fat older guy, it was, you're everything start closing in and getting dark on you. You can get enough oxygen sometimes when you do dismounted patrol, but
that's rough.
So, yeah.
So what we'll do is I'm gonna hit you with our Wintrust Mortgage question. Then we're gonna take a break in here, sponsorship here. And then when we come back, you can answer that question, and then we'll transition into talking about what you're doing now and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go with a little bit of a variation on the question that we've asked in a lot of other times. But if you could talk to, I'm going to say your 16-year-old self, if you could go back, talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? So think about that. We're going to take this break, and then we'll get your answer when we come back.
Okay.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
All right, so we're back, and obviously the guys that are following along here, Denny, thanking you for your service, and of course Chris and I and everybody echo that sentiment. But we asked you the question from Wintrust, 16-year-old self, if you could talk to yourself, what would you tell yourself?
One, I'd say stay off a motorcycle. Take better care of yourself. For me personally, but I think I kind of tell my kids this, work hard, save your money. Don't live like there's no tomorrow. I just, I don't know. I don't know if I'd do anything different in my life because I had a hell of a lot of fun, and I got to do a lot of things. I've got to achieve almost every goal I ever wanted in life. So I don't know what I would tell myself. I think I would work harder at school. I don't know why I'd need better grades, but I think I would apply myself a little bit more as far as school goes. And I think I would plan for my future a little bit better as far as career wise. I don't know if I'd do anything any different because I'd be faced with the same set of circumstances. My mother asked my sister, and she's got a PhD from Iowa State, Dr. Dodge, but she said the same thing. If you could go back in life and do anything over different, would you do any different? And my sister's answer was, hell no, I wouldn't, because I'd be faced with the same set of circumstances I had the first time. So I would do it exactly the way I did it, So I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. But I think if I had hindsight, I think I would, I don't know if I would save more money, not do the frivolous things that I've did in life, maybe. I wouldn't throw caution to the wind physically. Like when I was young, I would ride a motorcycle 100 miles an hour, and not think about what happens if you fall off of it. So, maybe I'd have that hindsight, but that's just stuff that comes with age, I think. So I don't know that I would do it much different. I don't know. Take better care of my body. I think that would be the biggest one. I would tell myself, hey, you're going to get old soon enough. Don't take better care of your body.
No need to hurry.
Yeah, don't rush the process.
Yeah. I always joke. I'm like, I didn't think I'd live this long, so that's why I lived the way I lived. But it's like, I didn't plan for this, but you got to plan for it. Now, the aches and pains, and I live down at the VA hospital. It seems like so, for everything. So that's probably it.
Well, it's a great answer because obviously you are who you are. So if you're, basically what you're saying is, if you're faced with the same decisions, you'd end up making the same decisions probably. Yeah. So, I mean, that's 100% accurate. So, let's get into what you're doing now. Most specifically, let's talk about your pizzas and We Will and how that happened. So you have a pizza company.
Yeah.
It's called Creaseman Foods, right?
Yeah, Creaseman Foods. Well, Creaseman Foods is kind of a history in itself. It came out of when I was in the 90s, I worked for my dad, which was Randy's Meats, and I drove a delivery truck and I sold food. And so I ran a route truck, and he ran, I don't know how many trucks he ran out of the Iowa plant, but he had interest in the Iowa plant and the Minnesota plant. When my brother graduated from college, he went right to Minnesota and bought out a relative and went to work in the Minnesota plant and owned it and operated it. And in those days we were grinding meat. We were making hamburger patties and seasoned grilled steaks, pizza burgers, breaded stuff. We had a breading line. And so we were basically a meat company that ground meat, ground beef, that whole 9 yards. And we processed some stuff for Fairways. And then in about 98, my brother bought my dad and my cousin Ray Gregg. He bought them out of business. And so he had both plants and he couldn't keep up with both of them, running Minnesota and running Iowa and going back and forth. And there was really no supervision of us. And so he eventually made a deal with the devil, I said, and he sold out to Farner Bakken, and I don't know what kind of deal he made, but that was the end of Randy's Meats in Boone. So that's when Creaseman Foods came about, because I'm now out of a job. I'm like, well, I know all my customers. They all love me. I can do this. And he still has this empty building that I'll rent from my brother, and I'll just start Creaseman Foods. So that's why I started Creaseman Foods. So that was in about 98. Well, in 2001, 9/11 happened. And then in those days, I was in the process of kind of merging with a company that's called Northern Lights out of Fort Dodge, Iowa. And so we were really good in the frozen. He was really good in the dry goods, had a beer distributorship. So we were kind of coming together as one company. And then I had to go to Kosovo. And then and so when I was in Kosovo, a lot of things happened. My drivers were fired or quit. My sales guy, was fired and quit. Nobody was really running my end of the company at the time. So, and John Deere had reached out to me. I don't know how, but they were looking for help. They were looking for team leaders. And so John Deere reached out to me, and you're looking for employment. And so I reached out to them, and I thought, well, maybe it'd be great to switch gears and get out of the food business. I've been in it for quite a few years, and get into something that I really liked, which is farm equipment and farming. And so I thought that would be a natural fit. So when I came back, I was going to have to invest a lot of money that I didn't have to kind of get Creaseman Food customers back. I had Hickory Park, bought stuff off me, Dublin Bay and Ames, all these great restaurants, Wallabies, great restaurants that I had. And we had built a relationship. Well, when I was overseas, prices were raised, people got pissed off. They quit buying from us. When I came back, I'd have to resurrect Creaseman Food. So I started at John Deere. So that's what kind of started that. And then I could kind of just tabled Creaseman Foods. When I got back from Afghanistan in 2012, I was injured. I had a torn rotator cuff that needed surgical intervention when I got back. So I landed at Fort Riley. They said, you can go home and have this done. You don't have to have it done here by a doctor, a hack here. You can have your own surgeon do it. Went back to Ames. Tom Greenwald, Dr. Greenwald from McFarland Clinic, operated on my shoulder. And so while I was doing it, I went up and saw my brother. I hadn't seen him for a while. And he gives me 3 cases of frozen pizzas, new varieties, new crust, new whatever. And I had been selling his pizza under the Randy's Meat label for years. Well, now he had he had advanced the company. And by this time, he had quit grinding meat. He just made frozen pizzas because he got so busy manufacturing them for other people. So I brought some back, and I stopped at the Fairway store in Ankeny. A friend of mine, Doug Hoagland, managed it, and runs it. And his marketing manager from Fairway was in there, and the assistant manager. And I gave him some pizzas. I said, hey, try these. I don't have freezer space for them all, so I gave them to him. And then I took what I wanted, and I came home. Well, they tried them. They cooked them up there at Fairway, and they liked them. They said, hey, we should sell these in their stores. So voila. So Creaseman Foods was kind of resurrected. And so I was selling pizzas in some Fairways and Hy-Vees in central Iowa while I was waiting to get refratted off the active duty rules. So the shoulder got better, and the Army doesn't do anything in a hurry. So it's a process to get out to what they call refratting. And so while I was refratting, I'm selling pizzas, driving a semi around, delivering pizzas and pulling pallets off and selling pizzas to these stores. And they went pretty well. But then John Deere sends me a letter saying, hey, are you coming back to work? It had been 4 years. I'd been gone out of John Deere for 4 years. They're like, are you coming back? Yeah, I got to come back. So then I couldn't keep up with it. So I kept up with a couple of Fairways, the North Ames store, the Boone store I had. I think the South Ankeny store was Doug Hoagland. I can't say enough about that guy. That guy is a phenomenal manager and a phenomenal good guy. He's a good friend. I've known him my whole life. And
I will
great.
jump in there. My 2 sons went to Strive Academy. They have special needs at DMAC, and part of their program was working at that particular Fairway.
Doug, yeah,
and they loved it.
Yeah, he's a wonderful manager. But anyway, so he kept, and I carried 3 different flavors. I carried Creaseman Foods, which is my own label. I don't have anything here. It says Creaseman Foods. I'd show it to you. But and then I also carried other companies. There was a Picasso brand. There was Firehouse, which was out of Bloomington. Bob Hanna owns the Firehouse brand. Firehouse he would sell millions of dollars of these firehouses up in North and South Dakota. up in the oil sand fields where you have a bar, they'd take like 60 cases a week at one little bar. I mean, that's a lot of pizzas, for the oil workers. But so, so I'd carry a couple labels. So Doug sold those for years, and a couple other stores I kept in touch with that I sold. And then We Will happened, and Colonel Updegraff, who lives in Wakanda, Illinois, was talking to Brett Bloom at We Will and said, "Hey, you should call Brent. And you should sell pizzas, and you can take a proceeds of the pizzas and donate them." And the methodology behind it was, most Cyclone fans aren't going to write a check for $5,000 to We Will, or to Iowa State. Most people, but everybody has a dollar. Everybody has a dollar, and and if the pizza's good, and they would buy the pizza. Say it's a $7 pizza, $6 pizza, and you're like, "Hey, I need another dollar," and the people are going to be like, "Okay, I can give you a dollar. A dollar's fine. It goes for a good cause." And so we just took the We Will logo. Brent Blum has been phenomenal, and Crystal Blum have been phenomenal to work with, and Derek Hudger at Iowa State. All these coaches have been great. I mean, they're just it's been a great relationship. So we started this here about a month ago. It took like 3 months to get the labeling and get approval, and the pizzas are made in Faribault, Minnesota, in a USDA inspected plant. So a lot of things got to go through USDA and labeling and stuff like that. So and then we started doing it, and it has. The reception. So the first store was Hoagland, Doug's store, Chris, and he sold almost 500 pizzas in about 17 days. It changed his category.
That's crazy.
His profitability with that one category, he was more profitable than his produce. So I mean, it was an impact.
Yeah.
So it took off, and I knew it was going to sell at that point. And then the Hy-Vees started putting them in, and they put them in at an alarming rate, and they're having success. And it's the Cyclone fans, which you two are, support and all that stuff. That's what makes the difference. And these Cyclone fans have turned out and have supported the We Will pizza, and We Will at a tremendous rate, and it's growing more and more every day. It's blossomed into this, and I don't get anything for it. I mean, we cover a little bit on the trucking end. We make the We Will pay for it, but they get $1 off each pizza. And that's the game, and that's how it works. And it's for a good cause, and it goes to support athletes and their families, and it's a wonderful cause, really. I mean, NIL's changing so much, it's becoming a horrible thing in itself. I don't think any of these coaches like the NIL, but it is what it is, and it's today's economy. And I liked what one of the players, I don't remember which one it was, his family was from Florida, and the family had not gotten up here to see him play. Well, the We Will Collective was able to help buy a plane ticket, hotel room, maybe an Iowa State shirt, to help facilitate that.
Sure.
So, the money goes for a good cause. I mean, the money isn't we're not just paying players, I don't think. I think it benefits Iowa State, and I think you're seeing it on the playing surface. You see it in basketball, you see it in football, and it's because of the fans. Cyclone fans are the best, most loyal, best fans in the country, and that's it's too bad there's not more of them. Because it's but that's how the We Will started, and so it was just kind of a continuation. Now it's becoming very, very busy for me now. Because I work at John Deere still, and I farm, and then I do the pizzas, and so now I'm getting more busier than I've ever been, but it's for a good cause, and Brett Bloom has done and Crystal both have done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I've done some volunteering with them and done a couple events with them, and I can't imagine a better set of people in charge of the We Will Collective more than Brent and Crystal. And Brent says this all the time whenever he gets a chance. We don't have a Boone Pickens who can, an oil tycoon who can write a big check, but we got plenty of Cyclone fans that can drink beer and eat a lot of pizza. And I mean, it's easy for me to give $25 a month, but then there'll be times where we're watching a game or whatever, and something cool happens, and I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna Venmo this, what the score is of the women's game. If they upset this Kansas State, who's with me, and next thing you know, he's got $2,000 or $3,000
Yeah.
Because somebody started something like, not just me, but I mean, other people have done that too. That's
Yeah.
the spirit of the Cyclone fans, honestly, is stuff like that.
You see it, and these players have been so gracious with their time. We had 14 or 15 of them, 16 of them, and even the old guys, Remsburg, and you got Colin Newell, that and these guys, and Sean Foster, all these guys and now you have Grant Triber, who's going to graduate, and Remsburg's done now, playing, but they still come and will help out, and they will help call these guys. And you have a kid named Tyler Miller, number 66 in your program, number 1 in your heart, and Jared Hufford, and Dylan Barrett from Wisconsin. He's new, but he lives with other offensive linemen. Those guys are like, hey, Crease Dog, give me your number. I'm like, hey, you guys want to do a pizza demo for We Will? Yeah. And they show up. Well, could we get a tight end? Well, yeah, we had Gabe Burkle, Rocco, he's a starting quarterback, and he is so good with the kids and the public, and he smiles, and they're pleasant, and they go to these demos that we've had 2 of them now at 2 Hy-Vees, and the turnout's been phenomenal. And they sign posters, they sign hats, footballs, all this stuff, and they come there and they're willing to do it, and they represent Iowa State, and it's really a credit to Matt Campbell and Hoodger and those guys that recruit these kids, because they are like Brock Purdy's. They're like very large Brock Purdy's, humble, polite, nice, friendly, not a bit of arrogance in them. Even the really good ones, you see these, wide receivers are great. Higgins, we had him at wonderful kids, and it really opened my eyes, when you meet them. And it kind of started with the offensive lineman, because I was a mentor for Grant Triber this last year, and I kind of got in the mentorship program. Lindsey Long called me, and so then I started, kids. I had Charlie Kohler and Mike Rose at first, and they're mechanical engineers, so I bring them to John Deere. I introduce them. Well, Charlie goes on; he's in the NFL, and Mike's still playing professional football, so can't help him. But then Sean Foster comes along; he's not going to play pro football, and so we get him a job at John Deere, and he's knocking it out of the park and doing great things at John Deere. And we got him in, and that was a huge success story. He does wonderful things. They got Connor Sally, the kicker. He works at John Deere. He only sits a couple chairs away from me, and so I see him, and he's doing wonderful things there. So you have, you got. So I joke with our factory manager in our management team, our operations team, that I said, when I'm done with John Deere, we'll have the biggest and the strongest and the toughest factory in the whole John Deere chain. I'm like, I said, we'll win any intramural event that you put one factory against the other, we're gonna kick some ass, so because Foster's 6'8", but
no kidding,
but they're they're high, Triber and these guys, they got mechanical engineering. We didn't have, I don't remember too many engineers back when I played, because the requirements, and these kids are coming out with 2 and 3 college degrees and certificates in leadership and all this other stuff, and they were I one of the managers at John Deere was like, well, I don't know if Sean should come into being a team leader right away, because that's not an introductory position. You need to, that's kind of a high position there at John Deere. And I'm like, he was the captain. He was a 2-year captain, corralling 120 players. I don't know how many captains that Matt Campbell has on his team, but I'm like, you have to have some people skills and some ability. I said, trust me, I'm the only one in this factory, one of the few guys in this factory that played football at Iowa State and worked here at John Deere. And I will tell you that this kid and a lot of these kids that Matt Campbell has are definitely qualified to be here. And now John Deere's doing a recruiting event. I think this week and in another week, 2 weeks, they're doing a recruiting event in the Sioux Cup end zone. They will be there trying to cultivate some of these guys, because they're high quality guys. They're not only good football players, but boy, they're high quality guys. I can't say enough about them.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I do want to know, when they do the pizza demo things, how many pizzas does that cost you? If you have 4 offensive linemen and a tight end,
well,
how much demoing is getting done?
Well, Hy-Vee or Fairway, and we'll be doing one with Southside Fairway here. they get it across the scale, so it's a sell for them. But you're right,
Yeah.
they can put away the pizzas, and they like them all. It doesn't matter if you have a garlic cheese out there, if you have a cheeseburger, they eat it, and the pizza is 12-inch pizza, it just disappears. But
Yeah.
they like it, and when the first one we did at the Southside Hy-Vee, the cook came out of the kitchen, and they were cooking them in the kitchen for us. Very gracious people at Hy-Vee, love them. Anyway, they came out and they they were gonna throw it away. It got cold, and I think it was like Remsburg or somebody said, "Oh, or Hufford, oh, don't throw that away." And they started grabbing the little squares and throwing them in, and they cleaned off the plate. I'm like, well, that didn't go to waste. So you don't waste anything. You waste nothing
Right.
when you cook one of those. You try to get it hot, and you try to get it to the customers, the little old ladies, the grandmothers coming by. It was kind of funny because Remsburg's grandmother came by, and it was great to see that interaction.
Mm.
I mean, just the way these guys interact with the public is just it's just a really positive thing. This We Will thing has turned out better than I thought it would, and with the football players that help.
I've told this story before that Matt Campbell does a victory day every year where he brings in 60 or 70 special needs kids, pairs them up with a football player. They run plays. They really go out for these kids. And my boys did it probably 2 or 3 years in a row. And Connor was actually one of their partners one year. So we kind of got to know Connor and whatever. But that's the beautiful thing about, I think, what We Will does is they do it a little different. Because they do bring these kids, these guys into the community, and I think that exposes them to so many different memories and things like that. That the quality and the character of the men that Matt Campbell recruits, then allows them to go into places like John Deere or whatever, and absolutely kill it, because not only are they smart, but they have good character and good values.
Good values, good people skills, and I have a picture. I should have sent it to you, Chris, but it's Jared Hufford. Now, if you see this guy, he's intimidating, and you could, if he had a white T-shirt on, you could show a picture on his back, a movie on his back. He is very broad, very muscly, very strong. But you see this huge guy bend down to this little tiny girl, this little blonde-haired girl. She had her hand up, and they were high-fiving, and I just happened to stand behind him, and I snapped a picture of it. And that, in essence, is really what these players epitomize in the community with people. And it's not easy to be a young kid, to be a 20, 22, 23-year-old kid, and you play football, you get clothes and shoes, and you're on TV, and there's NIL, and there's all this stuff, and like Rocco, the demand for his time. And he comes out, he's done 2 of them now, and it's just the quality of kids. I just think that they are. I don't know if Texas or I don't know how Notre Dame or any of these other schools do it, but and I've been so removed from college football for so many years, but boy, it's refreshing to know. If you're a Cyclone fan, you can be proud of what you have out there on the field. Win, lose, or draw, at the end of the day, you have high quality, high character kids. And it's a credit to Matt and his staff and his coaches and Jamie Pollard and the whole, it's the whole thing. It's just which is why I think all us old guys gravitate to it. We made enduring friendships, but how can you not support the quality of players that we have?
And I think you see that not only with the football staff, but TJ, I think, does a good job with that in the basketball staff too. Those guys are involved. Obviously, Coach Finley's a legend, and all the kids there are nice, good kids that are out doing stuff in the community. So I think that's the maybe unforeseen benefit of the NIL thing, that it gives people an opportunity to meet and see the athletes outside of the arena.
Well, I don't think
the NIL.
I don't think they hand, and I don't know how the NIL works at Iowa State. I'm not in that inner workings, and I don't profess to even understand how it works at other universities. But the impression that I get is no money's handed to these kids without doing something for it. These kids need to show up and support the community and the special needs or whatever. They need to be in the community doing community type things, to to get anything out of it. But the camps that they touch with kids and the community, the little old ladies, the grandmothers that shop at these stores, it's just a real treat to have those guys do that for We Will. And that sells a lot of pizzas. That'll sell like 18 cases of pizza. It'll sell about 300 pizzas in about 3-4 hours, having those guys at a store.
Well,
that's the impact that it has.
I told you, I talked to the Fairway manager here in Norwalk, and I was told, quote, corporate told him he couldn't sell it here. So I sent something to Brent, and Brent said pretty soon he's not going to have a choice. So, but I'll make the trek. I'll make the trek to the South Ankeny one and get some again. But
I talked to the Pleasant Hill manager on Saturday, and he goes, "Yeah, we're going to put them in." Matt Weber, I think he's going to put them in. He's going to take an order. So it depends on the manager.
Yeah.
So, we met with some of the Fairway heads. We've talked to Reynolds Kramer and Nick Huberty and Kobe Newbold, and we've talked to them. And the Fairway managers, if they have room, they have the ability to put them in. So if they say that they don't, I don't believe that to be a true statement.
I don't believe it either.
But I don't know.
I'm just
I don't
calling
know.
them out. I'm calling them out.
And that's good. That's what, but I think he's missing out. He's missing out, and
I agree. 100%.
Fairway go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim. That's all right.
I was going to say, we initially talked to Fairway, they came back, they wanted a breakfast pizza with a house divided, where you had the Cyclone logo and the Hawkeye logo. And I just said, one, we can't put that on a label, I don't think. Two, the Hawkeye people wouldn't sign off on it. And the Cyclone, and I don't think the pizza would sell then. I think you'd have Cyclones say, I'm not going to buy it because the Hawkeyes, and Hawkeye fans saying, I'm not going to buy it because of the Cyclones. That's a dumb thing. We're not going to buy it. And so I think that was a foolhardy thing to even want to do that. But we've talked to the Swarm people about trying to, we've talked to a lot of different people about trying to do like their NIL pizzas, to try to be fair. And they're like, no, it's not for us. That's not what we want. We just want big money cash. And I'm like, well, this is going to go on for a lot of years, I hope, or as long as the NIL does. So, and if people like the pizza and it's a good pizza and people are satisfied with it, then hopefully they'll buy it on that accord alone. So,
yeah. Dry ice, send me some breakfast pizzas, Chris.
All right, I got you.
We can do that. We can do that. I got coolers. I got shipping coolers, Aaron. So I just got to figure out FedEx. I haven't had you got to ship like on a Monday because it's 2-day ground. So I don't know how far out you are, but it's, as far as FedEx 2-day ground, because you got to put 20 pounds of dry ice in it. And so it's like, you got to run down to Hy-Vee or someplace to get the dry ice. Then you got to pack it and you got to label it. And I haven't figured out, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good on the computer. So I'm not very smart to get it through FedEx labeling. I have an account, but I'm not very, so it takes time.
I live in Seattle. So the cost would be exorbitant.
Which is why you asked me to do it. Which is why you asked me to do it.
Stuff to Lake Worth, Florida, on 2-day ground. I sent hams and steaks and stuff like that to a guy named Jeff Hansel. Big shout out to Jeff. But I've sent stuff to him before with dry ice and FedEx, and it was able to make it there. So I think I know what I'm doing. I think I can get it there. But Shroggy, I got a lot of guys in line that are, hounded me. Okay, ship it to me. And I'm like, okay, I promise it's coming, guys. I promise. But I haven't been able to. I just haven't had time. I haven't had time to get it done yet. But
that's a good.
I keep telling them I promise. Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap up with this final segment. We like to do a little bit of fundraising here too for a good cause. In the honor of of what your dad did and several other people and what you do for We Will. Steph Copley, who is a podcaster for the Cyclone Fanatic Network, was on a few years ago and jokingly told the host of this podcast to shut the fuck up so she could get her point across. So we decided to sponsor that, and we invite people to donate to the Young Women's Resource Center in honor of Steph Copley. But Tim, the way this works is I'm going to play a quick ad for the Young Women's Resource Center and invite people to donate. And then when we come back, Aaron and I have to shut the fuck up, and you can say whatever you want, carte blanche. And we can't, so think of something good to if you want to roast Keith, I'd be perfectly okay with that. But let's get a word from Steph Copley and we'll come back and then Aaron and I will shut the fuck up.
Hey everybody, it's Steph Copley, the woman behind the STFU segment on the Old Man Strength podcast. When I told the guys I wanted to sponsor this segment, they recommended that I make a charitable donation instead, so that's what I did. I chose the Young Women's Resource Center in Des Moines, Iowa. They're a nonprofit that supports, educates, and advocates for girls and young women ages 10 to 24. Their whole goal is to make sure that these young women become strong, self-confident, and successful. And if you know me at all, you know that aligns with my goals as well. If you're interested and would like to donate, check them out at ywrc.org and donate today. And remember, don't forget to STFU and listen every once in a while. Thanks.
And we do certainly invite you to donate to the Young Women's Resource Center. They have a lot of good programs there and do a lot of good.
I was
Okay,
just making
Tim.
a donation. I was just doing it just now.
Well, there you go. I appreciate that.
I just hit your QR code. So,
all right, perfect. Well, see, you're tech savvy. You know what you're doing.
Well, I don't know about that.
All right, so this is the chance. We'll shut the fuck up. You get to say whatever you want.
I don't know what I want to say. I think I've said it all. I don't know. You're out of questions. You guys are out of questions.
I'm not supposed to say anything.
Just anything you think you need to say that people need to hear. That's what we're looking for.
That's right.
I think you know, I don't know what I get out and buy those We Will pizzas, and support Iowa State, and that's about really all I have. Go Cyclones, but maybe dog Kishragi a little bit. He's a good man, but
well, that's what I was waiting for.
Well, I get so many stories. They're not appropriate, really. It's like because I've seen those.
We have an explicit warning on the front of this podcast. I'm just saying.
No, we're gonna save those stories.
That's right.
We'll do an event where we all sit around at a bar.
I got Chris Cox stories. Chris Cox was a roommate of mine. I got good Chris Cox stories. I call him the toughest guy. He's the big loin from Des Moines.
I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll tell you what we'll do, Tim. We'll have a reunion episode.
You need to do that. You need to have
We will. I'm going to set this up with Keith. We'll have Keith and you and Kevin. And
you got to get Greg Butts in there, and you got to get
Greg. I met
Chris
Greg
Cox
at the bar.
Todd Oxley.
I need a list here, Keith. I need a list of people. Hell, we might even do it in person somewhere.
You need to get a guy like Billy McHugh out of Chicago, and Ken Anderson and Jeff Watke. There's a whole bunch of guys that are
I like
phenomenal.
This idea.
When I tell you what, like if you get like a guy like Roger McCarron out of Chicago, he was a running back when I was there, and Cox. The stories are when those guys get in a room and they kind of go off, and to hear the polite insults that go back and forth is just really, really funny. And I know Todd Oxley and we always have some kind of dry banters back and forth at our tailgates and stuff, and it's just a lot of fun. And if you're a fly on the wall, you really get entertained. Like that picture you showed with those guys. That was those tailgates. Spot 1000. That's where my RV is in the RV lot. If anybody can hear this, everybody's always welcome every week. Got lots of wild turkey, lots of Crown Royal peach because that's what my wife drinks because she's a peach. You are what you drink.
See, Aaron was making fun of me earlier for drinking
flavored whiskey. Yeah,
Tim and I will be drinking the wild turkey.
Yeah, I like the wild turkey. I used to drink it because it's cheap. Now I drink it because I love it. But I'm not a huge beer guy, but I drink a lot of wild turkey and I like it. And Steve Cromie always makes me do a shot of Jameson. And Jeff Hansel when he comes back. Jeff Hansel, if you're not Full Metal Jacket around that guy, he's going to let you know it. So, but
I like this idea. Keith's already told me Butsy's garage with all of us. Creaseman is the MC.
I tell you what, those garages. Gibson comes over after work, and you get Tom Stoniak. Big shout out to him out in New Jersey, and he comes back or Philly, and I tell you what, it's a fun night.
Right. I'm marking this down. I'll pull the mic and the camera out and we'll do it. So, Tim, I can't thank you enough for coming on. For it's been an honor to listen to you talk about serving our country, but just all the cool stuff that you're doing for other people and things like that. And it's always great to make a good connection. So I really appreciate you coming on,
guys.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
So we will. We invite you to obviously listen to all the other Three Beards Media podcasts. We
Who's the third beard? Who's the third beard?
well, that's a story. We'll tell that story off air. That's a
Oh, all right.
That's another story that
I can imagine.
Right now, there's only 2 beards, but we certainly like the name, so we kept it.
Yeah.
So
It's a good name.
But I do want to give just one quick shout out to Jeff over at Gravitate Co-working. He was kind enough to sponsor our studio for the last 3 months, and unfortunately, we're moving on. So we are looking for new sponsors. So if you like what you hear here and you believe in our mission and you want to partner with us, we'd be happy to do that. Just give me a DM and you know how to reach me. So, but we are going to sign off here. Check out all the rest of the pods on our Three Beards Media Network. And Aaron, you got anything else?
I think between the two of us, we're big enough to be 3 people.
I think you're right. I'm trying to alleviate that.
It's called old man strength.
That's right. Old man. Right. Yeah, right. Well, I think old man fat was already taken. So, all right, guys.
That.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we are out of here.